All right, let me share again. Okay, hopefully you guys are seeing MySQL Workbench again. And this is definitely something that's happening from the Logitech because I don't think it was doing that before I started recording. Close these guys out. Okay, so we're moving on to, so I'll go ahead and just delete this stuff. If you're not saving stuff, then you can just use the same tab. You don't have to keep opening up tabs, and you also don't have to keep saving stuff unless it's like a deliverable, something you're supposed to turn in, or something that you want to save, for your own self, your own projects, or what have you. And just for fun, even though it doesn't really matter, I'm going to go ahead and clear this out again, just in case. It's not a bad habit to be in. Just clear it out at the beginning of each kind of session or each section of your workflow over a day, so it makes it easy to find errors if you're running into them. Like we were saying before, some errors are very helpful and others aren't. The majority of errors you will probably get are just going to be something like, yeah, you have an error in syntax error in your SQL statement near line 13 or something like that. Which, okay, thanks a bunch. I guess I'll go look up the documentation online. But, that's just kind of how it is. Some of them are a little bit more verbose, and sometimes you can look at those and right away see exactly what it was you did wrong. So something that I'll do if I happen to generate another error, I should have done it, before I cleared this out because there was an error up there right now. But yeah, you can right click and there's nothing there right now, but you can copy just an individual row and then just go up here, make a comment and paste it right into the tab. And it'll let possibly it may have some helpful stuff for you for what kind of error you might have committed. So yeah, hopefully, I'm sure I'll generate an error at some point along the way. I'll forget a comma or a closing quote or something like that. And when I do, I'll try to remember uh, to copy that just to show you the process for it. All right, so this is going to be mostly the chapter. This is Unit 3, retrieving data from a table. So just grabbing stuff from one table, no joins, nothing like that. And it's going to be mostly to do with the select statement. In fact, it's going to have entirely to do with the select statement, but there are other clauses that are going to go along with it, like the from clause, which is very important. You can almost always use that. Sorting the results, limiting the results, um, specifying conditions for the results in order to run a filter on which rows are going to get returned and so on. So let's take a look at the syntax real quick here. Now, if you want to, you're welcome to work along with me. Just open up MySQL Workbench and open up a tab and kind of type along. This is not exactly the stuff that's in the textbook. Some of it is. Some of it's pulled right from the textbook, and others of them are slightly different examples that I either thought were a little bit better or a little bit simpler or maybe just a little bit different. These are not the examples that they've got in the perspective exercise questions at the end of the chapter. Okay, so syntax first of a select statement. So many SQL commands begin with select, and this is just what you use to select, retrieve any data from a database. You can also have it generate data on the fly for you, which I'll talk about in just a second. But generally speaking, what you're doing is you're specifying a column or columns to be retrieved. In fact, you could say it's always columns, considering that you always wind up with columns down there in the results table. The next line that you see almost always, but I'm going to put this in optional here, is something that you guys have already seen, which is from, and then table. So let's talk about this. Why is this in square brackets, which indicates that it's an optional statement or that you don't always see it? Well, you can actually select stuff without specifying a particular table. And this is kind of data that is generated on the fly, as it were. So let's go ahead and try some of those before we do anything else. I'm going to do a select without the from clause. And recall that this, you guys already know about this multi-line C-based comment. And just remember the single-based ones are going to be, single-line comments are going to be with the hash. And we already noted, I think, last week that you need to have a space there or else it didn't work quite right. Okay, so selecting without the from, just some examples here. So most of these are not from the textbook, but there is a page in the textbook about this, and I can't remember I think it's generated data or something like that. I can't remember. It's not quite at the beginning of the chapter though. Anyway, probably the simplest thing, and probably what I would have liked to start Unit 1 with, but it didn't quite work out that way. I'm going to do a hello world. You guys know that you do that every time you're learning a new language, right? So I'm just going to do select and then put in a string here. Hello world, like such. Don't forget the semicolon. Don't forget to close the quote. Hit Control Enter, and we get a result down here. Now it's not only the result in a row, but it's also the result of the column. Basically, if MySQL doesn't know what it's supposed to be naming a column, then it's just going to name it with whatever data it has. But I should also be able to do that as. Remember, as is a way of creating an alias for a column, which is just a name for a generated column. So if I do as, I don't know, greeting, and do Control Enter, then it says greeting there for the column name, and I still get the hello world. So that's one way of generating content from a select statement without actually accessing a database. You can also have it run, I don't know, let's see, how about a math operation? So we do like 8 times 8. Then we get the result. There's 64, and notice the poor naming of the column there. There's probably someplace that you would definitely want to do it as. And let's see, what else can you do? You can grab the date here, and this is something that you are going to be doing in the chapter. So if I do like select, and there's a few different ways to do it. I'll show you a couple of shorter ways and then the way that the textbook does it. So the easiest way to grab the date and time stamp here is just do now. Select now, and this is a built-in function, and there it is. There's the rather verbose time, including the dates and the hour and the minute and the second and so on. There's also select current date. There it is. Does the same thing, except that it just gives me the year, so it's a little bit different. And then the one the textbook uses is select current date, like so. And that gives you this guy as well. And then it goes into formatting options for, I'm not going to go through all that stuff right now. But it is in there, and it is important because it's something that you're going to have to do for the exercises at the end of the chapter as well. There's a couple of things in each textbook chapter that I've noticed that they're kind of like, oh yeah, there's this little page on here, and you're kind of like reading through, skimming through, and like, oh yeah, there's a half page on dates. Okay, that's a pain. I'm going to split. And you wind up kind of glossing over it, and then it winds up being a question of the exercises, and all of a sudden you're tearing your hair out trying to figure out like how am I supposed to do this? So that's one of them. Just make a note of it when there's a little half page, that maybe even just like one or two little examples about how to deal with timestamps, and then like another one on how to deal with null values. And it's just like one or two little examples, and they wind up asking questions about it in the exercise. So I guess that's it. I'll show you one more thing just because we're not going to be using it for the rest of the semester. So just like to show you that you can set variables in MySQL. It's something we'll do next semester, I believe. So if you do a set and you do a variable with an @ and then it is common to capitalize. So let's see, I'm going to do planet equals world like this, and I'll go ahead and do Control Enter on that. Basically everything that winds up with a semicolon at the end of it, you want to run that before going on to the next thing, and there's getting green. That's what I'm looking for. I look down here and I look for the green checkboxes, and that's all good. And then I can use this, and I will do another select statement. And one of the functions that you guys have played with already from the textbook is concat. These pop-ups. I need to go figure out what setting to stop doing that because I find it irritating. But anyway, concat, and then I will do the string hello, and this time I will concatenate it with my variable planet, not plant, but planet, and I get the hello world. Yay. And then I can go back here and change this to something else. Let's say Jupiter. Got to run this statement again now. And then I go back here and run this one again. And this time I get hello Jupiter. So anyway, it's not something that you use a lot. I'm pretty sure we go the entire rest of the semester without playing around with variables at all. But I think the next semester we'll explore some chapters that include this stuff, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, that's kind of like going off into like a side thing, but not entirely. Remember, you're going to have to deal with current date. And I can't remember what else, but there are a couple other things where you're using the select that's not in relation to a database. Oh yeah, it has you do some math operations like this, where you're supposed to start with a starting thing of $50,000 and then find 10% of that and then add those two together to find the total due or something like that. And you do all that without accessing any table in any database. You're just like doing all this stuff on the fly. So that is some examples of doing select without accessing a table, and that's why this is in the brackets there. You don't always do it. Okay, so next up is going to be the where clause. And one or more conditions here. So I know you guys have done conditional statements in whatever C variant you guys have done. Where basically you're just testing to see if some condition is true or false, and if it's true, you run code. If it's not true, then you don't. And that's exactly what it's doing here. Basically, it's testing each row against some conditions. So if you want to like say, oh yeah, where I don't know, where date is less than January 1st, 2018 or something like that, then you go and find all the entries in which the date is before that time. That would be one example of filtering your results list. To order them or sort them, you have order by. And you order by whatever is the list of stuff that you're ordering. So usually you just do you've got several different columns and you're ordering by date. I say, okay, I've got all these, but they're not in order. I want to see the oldest ones first and then the newest ones last, so I'm going to have it ordered by date. You can do ascending or descending on those, and either one of those works. And then the limit, it comes last. And when I was first starting out, I always wanted to do limit by, but it's not. You just do the keyword limit and then specify I should say integer instead of a number, but that's probably a given. Yeah, you can limit the number of results you get. You say, yeah, I only want to see the first 10 results. And you can also do it to get results. It's either that or I don't know. There's one way you can do a range. Like I want to see from 10 to 20 or something like that. So I don't usually do that, so I can't remember exactly which one, but it's in one of these two. So this is the order that you want to do these in as well. So you're always going to see the select first, and then you're going to have the list of columns that you're doing, and then you have to tell it what table you want it from, and then all this stuff comes afterwards, these guys, which that was something I had trouble getting used to at first. I wanted to put these guys first, and I wanted the from table, the table name to be last. That's what made sense to me, but it's not the way that it's not the way it's structured here. It's not the way the syntax goes. So select, and then from, and then where, and then order by, and then limit. So let's take a look at some examples here. I'll go down past here. So this is going to be the select clause. This is something I like to do. I like when I'm going to have a slightly longer page, I like to kind of break it up by comments here. It's kind of like a way of doing a heading for a section of stuff, kind of, sort of. So it's up to you. But it definitely makes it easier for me to go through your guys' assignments. And if it winds up being difficult for me or onerous, then I may require it at some point in the future. But for now, I'm not making it a requirement. But it's probably a good idea. Okay, so starting with the syntax that you guys already know. Remember the splat is select all, and then from, and either invoices or, I think invoices and vendors are the only tables that you use for this whole chapter, I believe. So if we do select all from invoices, there we go. This is the results table. These are the columns that are there, and it's all the columns since we specified splat. And then these are all the entries or the rows down here, and it tells me down here how many I got, 114 rows. And if you need to, you can just scroll through these and count them yourself, but I'm pretty sure it's not lying. And let's see, let's go ahead and get that one, and then we'll do Same thing, select all from, and then vendors. Let's see the difference there, and then we have different column names and then a different number of rows return, 122 instead of 114. So that's what those guys are. And let's see, we already went over use AP and how to make sure you've got the right table activated. So let's see, I'll skip over that stuff. So the next thing before we get into some of the other stuff is that you can get in like specific columns. So instead of doing like a select all from invoices, I can say exactly which column I want. Well, let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to do Control Enter on this again so we can look and see what the columns are and then decide what we want. So let's see, I'll get the invoice number, the invoice date, and the invoice total. I think that's what the chapter does in its example. So the invoice total, the invoice date, I'll get that first, invoice total, and then payment total. Is that right? Yeah. Invoice, no. What did I say? Invoice number, invoice date, and invoice total. Okay, so these three guys right in a row. Sorry about that. Kind of looking between two computer monitors here. Okay, so select, and then instead of doing the splat, let's go ahead and just do these. These are going to be comma separated. It's a list of stuff. So we'll do invoice number. Remember, it's got to be spelled exactly like here, including the case sensitivity. And we'll do invoice date, and comma, and invoice total. And then I'll do the from invoices down here, like so. And there we go. And now it's just returning those three. So, okay, so coding style. If it's a shortish list like this, it's already getting a little bit long for comfort for me. But if it's a shortish list, I don't think there's anything wrong with putting it on one line like this. Someone who's kind of an old school coder, like from the 90s or something like that, might say, no, this is already getting too long because you might encounter a text editor with a smaller field than this one. But anyway, if you wind up with a longer list, or if some of the items within the list start getting long themselves, like you're using concat, and you're bringing together all kinds of different terms and so on, then in that case, it's not a bad thing to treat this like a code block and go ahead and separate these guys like so. Do the indent, they're still separated by commas, and then outdent again when you get to the next clause. So that's something you'll see, and as you see, if I do Control Enter, it runs exactly the same way. No problems. So they're both fine. You'll see me do both depending on whether it's a shortish list or a longerish list. Let's see, arithmetic expressions or arithmetic expressions, depending on who you ask. I'm going to do a select. See how often we're using select here? The whole chapter, it's all about select. And this one is going to be invoices as well. This is where you see me do the thing I was talking about, where I'll pop down to the next line that's going to be outdented, and then go back up and do an indent from there. Again, it doesn't matter in what order you type it. So for this one, I'm going to grab the vendor ID, and we're going to do an arithmetic expression, which is to find out how much is owed, which is going to be the payment total. So hang on, let's go ahead and run this guy again. Select all from invoices so we can see this stuff here. So we get the invoice total, which is the total amount that they, this vendor owed, and then how much they paid, and then how much they've been credited. So if you take the invoice total and subtract both of these from it, you'll get the amount that's still owed. So I'm going to do invoice total minus payment total minus credit total. So I'm going to do that in its own line here. And because it's a little bit longer, that's why I'm breaking it up onto the multi-lines with the indents and all that. So let's do invoice total minus, it's just the same as the hyphen right now, right next to the equal key. Invoice total minus payment total minus, and while I'm thinking about it, I just want to remind you that if you get tired of typing this stuff, you can get them from the navigator over here. If I go into the invoices and go to the columns, I can grab one of these identifiers by double-clicking on it. Let me go ahead and pull this out so we can see it a little bit better. So here are the different columns that are in there. And I've already got invoice total minus payment total, and now I want the credit total. There it is. Double-click on it, and it'll place it right over here. I usually type them, but there's some longer ones in there that might be easy to go ahead and crack the columns open and just double click from there. Okay, so invoice total minus payment total minus credit total from invoices, and I go ahead and enter it, and there we go. So the vendor ID over here, and then here's the amount. Most of the vendors are paid up, I noticed that. But if you scroll down here, then eventually you get to a point where you'll find some, I've got a very small window here. Oh, there's one. There's one. So there's one vendor, number 72, still owes $85.31, so they better pay out. Now, I think that the textbook does it, if I'm not mistaken, they do it a slightly different way. You can use parentheses around mathematical clauses and get it to give precedence, right? Getting it precedence. So basically, you're getting it to run the operation inside the parentheses first, and then whatever's outside of the parentheses. So this is another way of doing it. First, add the payment total and credit total together, and then subtract that whole sum from invoice total. I can't remember which the textbook does, but in any case, I mean, to me, this is simpler because there's less syntax involved, less punctuation, right? So I'll just go ahead and do it like that. But either way is perfectly fine. Whatever gets you there in the end. Okay, so there is the arithmetic expression. We already looked at the aliases, but let's take a look at it again. This is the name of this column here. It took this expression and made that the name of the column because it didn't have any other data to work with. This is not a very good name for a column. It's not a very good identifier, right? It's not very user-friendly. Although it is, I mean, it is explicit, I'll give it that. But this is where the as keyword, the as clause comes in, and this I am going to put on a new. Now, if it's a subordinate clause like this, it's not a bad idea to indent one further. It's totally not necessary, but it helps. Then I know as soon as I look at this, I know exactly what as is going to apply to without having to start counting lines or anything. So we'll give it a name and call it balance due. So let me talk about this naming convention here. It's common to do it a different way, to continue to use the underscore syntax that the rest of the application or the rest of the coding language used, the scripting language used. So I can call this balance due, like so, and that works perfectly fine. So I do Control Enter, and it works fine. Notice I did not have to put quotes around it. So some of you guys can probably already figure out why I had to put quotes around the other one. It's because I had a space in there. This one does not. That's part of the point of doing the underscore thing. But if you want to do it the other way, if you've got some content manager who would prefer to read straight English than something that looks a little more, frighteningly codey, then go ahead and do this instead. So balance due, put quotes around it, and then it'll give it that name. No problem. But do remember the quotes. If there is spaces in here, and some punctuation too, I believe. I'd have to go and look that up to find out what punctuation, because obviously it's not all punctuation. It can handle the underscore just fine. But I'm not sure about dashes. Let's try that really quick. I want to try balance hyphen do. I want to see if that works or not. And nope, see, it doesn't like it. It doesn't like the hyphen. So in that case, go ahead and do it this way. And that works out. And it gives me the result. How's everybody doing so far? Anybody have questions or struggling to keep up if you're following along? No issues? Okay, again, don't hesitate to let me know. I welcome any and all questions at any time. That's what I'm here for. Okay, and then let's see, did we already do the concat? Well, we did that with this one here, but there is a little section on concat in the textbook, so I'll go ahead and do it again here. So let's see, blah, 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 yeah. Select, and this time I'm doing it from vendors. And we want the vendor name. Sometimes you put in an extra identifier column just so you can kind of see what's going on. Like we could have just brought this in here, but I don't know, it might be helpful to see like, oh yeah, what is the vendor ID? Which vendor is it that owes the $13.58 or vice versa, whatever it was. So anyway, I'm putting in the vendor name so that we can see everything. And if I just do enter on that. There they are. There are the vendor names. They are in alphabetical order right now. We'll talk about ordering in just a bit. Let's put a new column in here, and we're going to do a concat. And let's do vendor city. There it is. I'm trying to remind myself to do the double quotes here. I'm very much a single quotes guy. This comes from long use in JavaScript, I think. But I had myself pretty well trained. Well, certainly when I do HTML, it's double quotes, right? And then with this one, almost all the examples that I see anywhere are in double quotes. So I'm trying to train myself to do that just for MySQL. I'll succeed eventually. It might take a little bit of time. But basically, we have these things that are separated by commas, and then usually you have some kind of a string, whether it's a comma or just an empty space, a non-breaking space, or what have you, and then a couple of identifiers being concatenated together. Hit return, and there it is, Madison, Wisconsin, blah, 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 and then here's, again, that horrible identifier for that column, so let's do an as clause, and I'm going to do it on a new line again. This is actually a pretty good example of winding up with text edit, in an environment that is actually fairly small now because I've zoomed in. So this is the kind of place where you might actually start to see an example of, oh yeah, some of these lines might actually wind up getting too long if you didn't break them up. Whereas if I zoomed out again, it wouldn't be an issue. But let's go ahead and do as, and then I'll do the quote thing again, vendor location. There we go. And now we've got a better identifier for that column. You want to start getting in the habit of that probably right away. When you wind up with some kind of weird expression like name for a results column here, you probably want to go ahead and give it an alias so that it's a little bit easier to read. And I think most of the examples in the textbook, once it introduces this syntax, it's pretty good about continuing with that to kind of get you in the habit of doing it. Okay, so let's go ahead and eliminate some duplicate rows, and then we'll move on to the where clause. So I'm going to do a select vendor state from the vendors, and this is short enough that it'll just go on one line. There it is. So Wisconsin, DC, DC. Notice there's two DCs in a row, and then there's a bunch of Californias here, and a bunch of them get done with a whole ton of Californias, as you might expect. Let's say that I just want to find out what are all the states that we're operating in. Okay, what are all the states that we've sold something in? And I don't want to get all these duplicates back. I don't want more than one DC. I don't want more than one California. I just want one of each. So this is where I can use, you'd think it would be unique, right? This is what I always want to type, select unique, but that's for creating a database. That means something different, or creating columns. Use the keyword distinct instead. So select distinct. Notice that it comes right after the select. It might be intuitive, like, yeah, I want to put that at the end of the clause over here, but it's select distinct. They go together. That's something that this whole language is built on. If case sensitivity is not really a thing in the language very much, the ordering of the clause commands are. So select distinct, vendor state from vendors, and when I do this, I will expect to not see these duplicates. I expect to see only one DC and only one California, so let's try it. So yeah, DC is not repeated. There's California, and it doesn't show up anywhere else. It's not letting me, there we go. Much shorter list, right? The last one had, I can't see it because it's got the Google Meet thing over it, but yeah, 122 rows. Well, of course, 122 rows because it got the whole thing, but now only 22 rows are returned because it got rid of all the duplicates there. So that is select distinct. That is to remove duplicate entries. Let's see, one thing I forgot to mention, and I want to. Let me scroll back up to the top here. Not quite the top. There we go. Select all from either one of these, and I'll do Control Enter. And notice it gives me the whole 114 rows. Let me go ahead and scroll all the way to the bottom here. And notice that it gives me an extra row here filled with null values. You guys already know what null means. It means there's no data available for that bucket of info. This is a MySQL Workbench thing, and they specifically do that so that if you want to, you can go in here and add another row by hand. Just go ahead and type that with those values right in there, and if you want to, hit return and keep going. I have never done this personally. I always do it up here. I don't know. I just feel more comfortable looking at code, double checking it before I execute it. But anyway, more than one student has asked me why those are there, and that's why. And it only does that if you're returning everything. It's assuming that you're not going to do it if you're returning less than the full gamut of columns here. So in this case it is. It's selecting everything, and so it gives me that null row at the bottom. If I go to this one, again, remember this is only one row, or one column rather, and scrolling to the bottom, and it's not giving me any null values in there. So it only does it if you're returning the whole shebang. So it's one way of adding to the data in a table if you want to. All right, goody. We're on to the where clause. Before I do, here's another good spot. Any questions about anything? No, you guys are all happy? This might be the first class. Okay, cool. I'll move on. Any questions also means anything like you want me to slow down, or you want to take a little break before moving on because you're trying to get caught up with something, or you want me to explain something that I did or do it again, or anything like that. Anything like that, it's all fair game. Okay, cool. So we did limit. We didn't do, let's see. No, we did not do limit. Okay, cool. All right, we're starting in the right place. So here we go. So remember, where is where you set a condition. It's like a conditional statement in a procedural language, except it uses where instead of if. So let's go ahead and do select all from invoices, and where, and here's where we set a condition. So I suppose the most obvious one is if we were just trying to grab the invoice or invoices from one particular vendor. So let's say where, or maybe we've got an invoice number already. So let's go ahead and do that one. So invoice, if I can type. No, I can't. There we go. Where invoice ID equals, I don't know, 99. And of course it gives me one row. Now remember, anytime we return all rows, anytime you use the splat, it's going to give you those nulls down there. So that's all that means. You don't have to worry about them. Just ignore them. So this is where, it gives us one single entry instead of all of them. So obviously that's a useful thing. The other thing that I was going to mention is, let's see, if we do like where vendor ID equals, and I don't know, let's say 6. Oh, and there's no vendor ID 6. Let's see. Let's try 99 like I did before. Is there a vendor ID 99? Okay, cool. Vendor ID 99 has one invoice. And if we wanted to, we could go ahead and do a select all from invoices and scroll down until we found a vendor ID that had more than one invoice on them. So it can return more than one row. In this case, it's only returning one row, but it certainly can return more than one. So that's what the where clause is. Notice you don't need any parentheses or anything like you often do with conditions. It's just right there. Let's see. So instead of doing equals, so these are just kind of arithmetic operators here, right? You can use like some of the other ones here. So let's see, invoice ID is, let's say, less than or equal to 10. So this should bring back 10 invoice IDs, presuming that they're in order, or that there are actually any underneath 10. Are there any? Yes. Invoice ID, there we go. So that's these guys over here. So it's just getting me the first 11, I suppose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, just 10 of them. And so these are one of these arithmetic operators, and it has a page in the chapter textbook that goes about listing some of those that are available for you. So that's just some of those. Let's do a limit clause. I'll do a select all from invoices first I'll do the whole thing. Let's try that again. Control Enter. And then limit, and then just tell it how many you want. So I'll do limit 10. And that's another way of kind of doing what we did up here. And it's only returning those top 10. Now it happens to be the same. In this case, keep in mind that these can be something different because sometimes entries get deleted. So maybe number 3 gets deleted at some point down the way, and these numbers are not going to reorder themselves. So in that case, limit 10 would get us all the way up to the number 11 because it would be skipping number 3, whereas this one would get you 9 because it would be reducing the number of entries there. So in this case, they happen to be the same, but they might not always be the same. So limit is probably the easiest of these clauses. There's just a couple of ways to use it. That's one of them. This is what I always, in the early days, I kept wanting to do this, limit by 10, which of course makes no sense if you think about it. But for whatever reason, I wanted to do it. And if you do that, then it'll get you an error message. Doesn't work. Just do it like this. Easy peasy. There we go. Okay, so we talked about some of these mathematic operators here. There's also logical operators, which are like or, not, and, things like that. So let's do another select statement. Let's do one of each. Yeah, that's what I got in my notes here. I want to do the same thing twice, kind of like we just did with the limit and the arithmetic and the where clause. So I'm going to do, let's see, we'll do select invoice. Let's do invoice total from, obviously, invoices. And we'll do it kind of the mathematics. Actually, the second way we'll wind up having both operators in it, so that's kind of okay. So let's say I want to find, remember this expression that we had up here. Let me find it. Invoice total minus payment total minus credit total, which is the balance that is due, right? So I'm just going to copy that guy. And let's do a where statement here, where clause, and then paste that in there. And then I'm going to do does not equal 0. So I'm finding out, like any of these entries that, actually owe us money still, or maybe there's a positive credit balance, I don't know. But this would be equals 0, like that. Notice, for those of you who are used to using C-based languages, you do not use the double equals. Like, this is what I would expect in most of the, most of the languages I've ever scripted in would look like that, because you're testing, instead of making a statement. But in this case, it's just the one equal. And let's see, let's see the invoice total. Yeah, we better do some more so this actually makes some sense, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense here. Let's go ahead and add in a couple of more columns here. I'm going to make a list here. Let's do invoice total, and let's do all three. Do payment total and credit total. And actually that's it. So, and then only return those where minusing these two from that one will give you 0. And yeah. Yeah, it's still not giving us the whole spiel, but let's go ahead and try it the opposite way. I think what's leading to my confusion is it's just returning too many columns right now, or rather too many rows. So let's change this. So there's a couple of different ways to do is not equal to in this language. This is the one that I'm used to from other languages. I don't think I've ever actually used this, but I believe this will also work, just not equal 0. But I'm going to use the one that I'm familiar with. So I'm going to do, oops, let's try that again. Not equal 0. Control Enter. And then I'm getting only 11 rows here. And these are going to be the ones, so these are the folks that still owe us money, because these two subtract from this one don't near 0 out, which means there's still some money owed somewhere. So, okay, let's go ahead, and I think I will simplify this again. There we go. So it's just the invoice total now. I just want to show you another way of getting the same results, these 11 rows. That's the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this. I'm going to paste or type it all again. Copy it and then hit return. Go down here. And this is going to seem silly, but I just want to do this a slightly different way just to show a logical operator too. And I'm going to use the not. So just as this one where invoice total minus blah, 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 minus blah, blah, blah does not equal 0, we have the negative here, where not. Now this is where I want to put it. Like my brain wants me to go here, where invoice total minus payment total minus credit total does not equal 0. That's the way like my English brain wants it. And that's like the draw of doing something like Ruby. Ruby is designed around human language, so things appear in the way that we tend to think them. But this will not do it. It's not happy. So you do where not. And do Control Enter. Now it's happy, and it gives us the same 11 rows. So this guy right here is the same thing as this right here. This one has a single arithmetic operator. This one has the logical operator and a somewhat simpler arithmetic operator. Okay, that was the point of doing those. So let's go ahead and move on from there. Okay, next operator. There's some stuff with the in operator. So this is kind of an important one in SQL. Let's go ahead and just do another select all. How are we doing on time here? 7:15. We're getting there. I'll do a select all from vendors. Start with that. There we go. And let's say I want to get only the vendors that are in California. And the textbook uses an example where it's California and Nevada and Oregon. And it's maybe not the best example because there actually aren't any entries in Oregon in this table. But let's go try it here. So it's going to be another where clause. And I'm going to do where, and this time it's the in operator. So instead of where not, it's going to be where in. And, oh, I need the identifier first. So where vendor state, that's what we're looking up here, right? We're looking up whether or not something is in California, which is this column right here. So where vendor state in, and then this is what I want to do. Again, I'm giving you guys the stuff that the errors that I tend to do or that I tended to do when I was starting out. I wanted to do this, and of course it's not going to be able to do that. It's just treating this like a string, right? So it's saying, oh yeah, I can't find a vendor state in this string at all. In fact, I think it'll give me an error message. Yeah, it does. It doesn't like the syntax. Basically, it's expecting to see a set of items here. Even if there's only one item, surround it with the parentheses in order to turn it into a set, just like in JavaScript. Now if I do Control Enter, and it's only giving me 75 rows, which are all the vendors that are in the state of California. That's a lot of them. We're a big state. Should I try Kansas? What is it? KS? Is that right? Is it KA or KS?
KS.
KS, that's what I thought. Oh, we got one in Kansas. Cool. There it is. Okay, so like I was saying, the idea is that you're setting this up as a list. So if you have
Olathe. Nice small. Or used to be.
Where is it?
Olathe.
Olathe. Huh. I wouldn't even know how to pronounce that. Olathe.
Well, it helps you have someone that's been there a few times.
I understand there are a lot of Germanic names in the middle part of the country.
Seems to be.
Yeah.
That are Native American based.
Ah. Okay, so
which
this is...
I don't know for sure, but I think this one is.
Yeah, now that you mention it, that sounds right. Let me expand this out into like an actual set with like more than one thing. So if we do like, I think there are a couple from Nevada. So this is the idea. This is why you have to put the parentheses around it, is so that you can account for like an actual set of more than one thing. Even if it's just one, you still put it in parentheses, but here we go. And now we've got 77 rows where there's all California, but there's a couple of Nevadas. I think there's one at the end and one part way up. So that's the idea. So let's say instead of wanting to find all the vendor states that are in California and Nevada, you want to find all the vendor states that are not in California or Nevada. I'm sick of those Californians. The whole West Coast, I don't want anything to do with it. And so I will do, instead of in, we will add another operator here, and this will be not in. We're vendor state not in California or Nevada, and then I should get all the rest of them. So there's all the vendor states. If I scroll through all these, I'm not going to see CA or NV anywhere. So there is that operator. And let's see, before we get to the fun stuff, I'm going to do one more operator here. I'm going to use the between. From invoices this time. Notice we're using like where for all of these, right? That is, it's so often when you use these operators because they're there to compare stuff, right? And that's how you test for conditions and so on. So let's see, where, and I will do invoice total between. And here you can use, it's going to be a numerical amount, right? So let's say I don't want the small fry. I don't want the people who owe us like $6 or whatever. So I want them to be at least $50, but then less than $500, let's say. So here's another operator, and so between 50 and 500, and hit return. And there's the invoice totals and everything that you're going to see in here. 39 rows, it's going to be 50 or more or 500 and less. This is inclusive, by the way. So if there were one that was exactly $50 or $500, they would also be included in this set. Okay, so that's actually two new operators on that line, between and let's go on. This is, I didn't have this in my notes originally, but I want to make sure to include it because there is one of the chapter exercises that involves this one, and regular expressions. There's not much you have to remember in MySQL for regular expressions, whereas in some languages it's insane, like trying to memorize how you build those things. At least it has been for me. But it's very, very simple. There's actually just a couple things you have to worry about, a couple of clauses. One of them is like, and you know, where something is like, and then you put an expression inside quotes. Some people like to use this one, no pun intended. I don't personally. I like to use the regular expressions that are closer to what I've done with other scripting languages. And there's really only two that you usually need. And they are, well, three. Okay, there's the starts with, so you want to be able to grab the beginning of a string, or ends with, you want to grab the end of a string, or you want to use the or so that you can test for multiple conditions. So I'm assuming you guys have all done C#, so you've done like regular expressions at some point. Then again, in a lot of my beginning coding classes, I didn't do any regular expressions. I had to kind of
C++.
run them on my own. What's that?
Said C++.
Oh, C++. I keep doing that, don't I? Okay, so yeah, C++. And when you guys took that, did you do regular expressions in any of those classes?
I'm pretty sure we did. It was a little bit ago, so I don't remember everything.
Yeah, of course not. I don't remember everything. If I have to do something elegant in JavaScript or something, I still have to pull out my table and take a look at it because it gets crazy.
Plus, fortunately, my instructor at the time tended to just kind of give us all the information at once, so I can't exactly say I remember a good portion of what he's trying to teach us.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I'll just have three expressions for you guys. So like I was just saying, a string starts with certain character or characters, or ends with those characters, or you know, using the or operator so you can test for multiple things. So let's go ahead and do the first one here. So let's say I want to have all the cities. Let's bring up the vendors first here. I know it's upstairs there, but I'll just go ahead and vendors. There we go. Okay, so yeah, the vendor cities, and I want to grab all of the cities that start with Sam. San Francisco, Santa Ana. I'm sure there's a San Diego in there. Yeah, there's a San Diego. Who knows what else? So let's go ahead and do that. And instead of doing all, let's just go ahead and do vendor city. There we go. So there they all are. And we'll do another where. Vendor city. And this is where, you know, if you have something very specifically that you were looking for, then you could just use the equals math operator and just so, yeah, where city equals San Francisco. Like so, and then it would just return those guys there. This is probably a good point to remind you that MySQL treats strings differently from any other scripting language I've ever seen. And it's not case sensitive, which like it blows my mind that they did it that way. But I guess they were trying to make things as flexible as humanly possible. Anyway, this is how you would do it if you wanted to look for one particular thing. But like we said, we just want to search for all the cities that start with San, and it could be anything after that. So instead of doing that, we're going to do regexp and then put what you're testing for in quotes there. And so the starts with operator here is if you do shift 6 and get the little upward caret or caret, however you want to say that. And then this is the starts with. And this, by the way, they use the same operator in like CSS, JavaScript, that sort of thing. So I presume that it comes from C-based languages. So anyway, I'll do the starts with and then San. I can't force myself to do it like with different case. I'm like, got to do it that way. There we go. So we got all of Santa Barbara, San Francisco, San Diego, Santa Ana, and I guess that's it. Okay. So that is the starts with guy right there. Just put that at the beginning and then type whatever characters you want to start with there. And then that'll do it. Let's see, do I want to do city name? I don't have my notes. I'm going to do the zip code. I've been reading up on zip codes. I kind of just already assumed without thinking about it that, oh yeah, they just kind of do it almost at random, the numbers, but they actually, like the different digits actually mean something in zip code. I didn't realize that before. So let's go ahead and do select. And this time I am going to open up vendors. I just don't feel like typing vendor zip code twice here. Select vendor zip code from vendors. Rain's coming down pretty good now. I don't know about you guys. And there's the vendor zip code. It's going to bring in all of them, 122 rows. And let's
what does 69 mean again?
I'm sorry?
How do you read 69? Like when you're reading it? What's the reg exp?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Line 69?
Oh, line
How do you
69.
read that?
Okay. So, okay, I got the right line now. So what's the question?
How do you read it? What's the second command?
Oh, it's regexp, regular expression, regexp.
Okay, and that just means if it says this?
Basically, I mean, I think of it like matches. So if you think where vendor city matches and then you're looking for a certain number of characters that it's going to match, and the characters have to happen at the beginning of that string. So that's the way I think of this in my head, where vendor city
The arrow
matches.
means beginning?
Yeah, the little caret here, the shift 6, means that this string has to happen at the beginning.
Okay.
So there might be other cities that have San elsewhere in the name. Looks like it does not, but yeah, that would be for grabbing it anywhere, and then the caret at the beginning means that this string San has to happen at the beginning of that string. But yeah, this is just regexp, regular expression. Okay, so sorry I didn't understand your question there, but I think we got it now. Okay, so the zip code. Let's do the zip code now. Let's grab the last couple of characters from the zip code instead of the first characters from the city name. So we'll do another where clause. And let's see. No. Regexp. And the last two I'm going to do are, let's see, 08. And the last, like to get something from the end of the string is going to be a $sign instead of the array. And again, this works in JavaScript, CSS, etc. But I'm used to it happening still at the beginning. I'm used to doing like something like this in order to find, because to me the $sign, it always means the end of the string, so why not keep the syntax the same? But MySQL wants you to put it at the end. I guess that makes it more explicit or something like that. So just remember that. They're doing that for you, even though I find it confusing personally. So $08, instead of like finding san substring at the beginning of the string, it's looking for 08 at the end of the string. So I'm expecting it to return all zip codes that have 08 at the end. Control Enter, and it looks like there's just one of them. Let's switch it to 18, and there's 3 of those. So based on what I've been reading recently, it's perfectly reasonable that you might want to get a couple of different zip codes with the same 2 characters at the end. And so that'll bring me to the last bit here, which is the OR operator in here, where you just do the pipe here. So if I do Shift and then the character right above the enter key, then I get that vertical pipe. And this is like if you do a double one of those, it's the OR operator in C-based languages, right? So it shouldn't be anything that you haven't seen before. So I'll do anything that has like 08 at the end of the zip code or 18 at the end of the zip code. So I'll use the $sign again, Control Enter, and there you go. So it's got 3 18s and it's got an 08 in the middle there too. So these I'm making a deal of because, again, just like dealing with null and whatever, did we do null? We might not have even done null. I don't know why, but it looks like I might have missed that one. But anyway, yeah, this does involve at least one of the exercises at the end of the chapter. You're going to be doing the regexp, and I put the page number on. See how helpful I am? I put the page number on the assignment. We'll take a look at that in just a second. So, but anyway, you will have to deal with some kind of regexp. I think that the chapter, like the author, likes the like keyword, so I think that's what Maroc is recommending that you do. Either one's fine, whatever works for you. Again, I like regexp better personally. Okay, I think with the if null and if not null, I'll let you guys read about that on your own. I don't want to go back and mess with this at this point. I just want to do one last example here because I want to show you a bug in MySQL.
Mr. Luke,
Yes.
you said regex and like are the same?
They're not quite the same. They've got slightly different syntax. So they're not exactly the same, but they're both there to do regular expressions. I think like is considered kind of a shortcut for some things. But yeah, the syntax will be slightly different for those.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one last grand example, and then I will let you guys go for a much needed break. What I'm going to do, select, as always, right, from vendors. And we're going to do a couple of things with this. I'm going to put a couple of columns in here. So we're going to grab the vendor name, and then we're going to do a concatenation. We did this one before. I don't feel like hunting for it, so I'm just going to type it over again. We did vendor city, and then the comma, and then vendor state. And we did an alias there, so as vendor location. I think this is exactly what we did before. We tried it a couple of different ways. We tried it with the underscore, and then we tried it with quotes so we could get the space in there. So let's go ahead and hit Control Enter here. And that's good so far. There's the new alias name for the result column. So just real quickly, you can do an order by, and that is to sort these. Now, I still make this error sometimes because I think of it as sorting the results. I not very often, but still occasionally, I will do a sort by. And when I was first starting out, I did this constantly. It was sort of great irritation to me. But luckily, you know, they have the code hinting here, the code coloring, and so if you don't see your clause in blue, then there's something going wrong there, right? So sort by is not it. It's going to be order by, which is how you sort your columns. And so let's just go ahead and order by, I don't know, let's order by vendor state for right now. Vendor state. State, yeah. There we go. And so right now, the states are not in order, right? There's Wisconsin, there's DC, there's California, and so on. And I go ahead and do that, and now it's AZ, AZ, CA, and so on, and these are in order there. Notice that I don't even have vendor state as its own column here, and it's still able to order that, and it's not a problem. Let's see, if I look under the Californias, here's Fresno, California, and then Los Angeles, and then Sacramento, Santa Ana, and then another Fresno. See, so these are not in order within the state here. States are in order, but the cities within the state are not. I can do both of these. I can put a comma here and turn this into a list, order by vendor state, and then by vendor city, like so. And now it starts out looking the same, but now when you go to California, these are going to be in order, the cities as well. So Anaheim, and then Brea, and then et cetera, wherever those other ones are, Fresno, et cetera. So you can totally do this. You can also do descending. Now these are ascending by default. So there is an ASC, but you almost never need to use it. But if you needed to do this in reverse order, then you can do descending. And now this is why I'm doing this. The important thing is to know that the descending does not apply to both of the items on the list here. It only applies to the last one here. So the states are still ascending from A to Z, but within California, you can see that the cities are now backwards. In order for both to happen, you would need to have a descending on both of these. And now the states and the cities within them are both descending. Okay, so that's kind of a basic thing to order by. Let's go ahead and change that right now. Instead of ordering by vendor state or vendor city, what I want to do is order by my new alias. I just want to order it like this. So why can't I do that? Let's go ahead and give it a try here. There we go. And I'm going to do vendor location in quotes because there's a space, and then hit return, and they are not going in any kind of order. It's Madison, Wisconsin. It's the order it was at the beginning. So let me show you what does work. If you don't put the quotes here, so let's say we did that alternate version that we did upstairs where we use the underscore. So we do as vendor underscore location. And if I do that, then it works. Anaheim, Ann Arbor, Auburn Hills, Boston, it's going in order of alphabetical, right? So that works. You can actually grab this alias result and you can order it on that. Even though it's a generated column, you can do that. But for some reason, doing the ones with quotes here does not work. It's not giving me an error or anything, it's just not doing it. So this is, as far as I can tell, I need to read more. It may be a bug in MySQL. There are people out there who say it's not actually a bug, but it seems pretty buggy to me because there is a workaround. Anytime there's something that you can't do, which you should be able to do, but there's a different way that actually makes it work, I tend to think it's kind of buggy, personally. Here is the solution. If you need to do this, if your content manager absolutely needs to have English-based stuff and you need to order by that generated list name, instead of using double quotes, or, by the way, single quotes, that doesn't work either. Again, still not doing it. Here's what works. Use backtick quotes. Check it out. Ah, it works. Huzzah! So I don't know about you, that seems pretty buggy to me. That's the kind of thing where it's just like you'd never know that if you didn't happen to have seen it in action. Like someone had to show me that. I never ever would have found it on my own. So now I'm showing you. If you ever needed to like order by the name of a generated column on an alias, then and has spaces and it has to keep the spaces, then use the backtick quotes here. That's what works. You probably won't have to remember that, but just in case you do, keep it in your notes. Okay, I think that I better stop talking here. Once again, I've gone over. I really will try to contain that in the future. But like I said, this is a big chapter. A lot of stuff happening in this chapter. So let me. Yeah, go ahead. Question?
Yeah, I was going over the pages, and it's a good chunk of pages for this chapter.
It is a good chunk of pages. I've got the due date right now for Thursday, but I'm reconsidering that. If I do push it to later than that, then there may be some overlap between this and the next chapter. But yeah, it is a long chapter, so I'm considering pushing it out to Saturday. Let's see how everybody feels by the end of lab, which actually is coming up in not more than an hour. Before I stop the recording, any questions about anything that I did here? Okay, let me stop the recording.